The children were lining up for recess when they noticed movement under the apple trees. It wasn't a stray dog. It wasn't a deer. It was a mother bear with her cubs, and she had chosen the schoolyard as her resting place. The last bell before recess rang, and the laughter of children spilled across the schoolyard like water from an open tap. It was a mild autumn afternoon, the kind of day when the air carried both warmth from the sun and the crisp edge of approaching winter. The apple trees near the back fence still held some of their late fruit, small, red, and sweet. Children often gathered fallen apples after lunch, racing each other to see who could collect the biggest or juiciest one. But today, something else was waiting beneath those trees. From the classroom window, a girl named Aisha was the first to notice movement. "Miss," she whispered, tugging at her teacher's sleeve. "There's something under the trees." At first, the teacher, Mrs. Hamid, thought it might be a dog from the village. Dogs sometimes wandered onto school grounds. But when she leaned forward and focused, her breath caught in her throat. There, sprawled under the shade of the apple trees, was a large mother bear. Her fur glistened brown-gold in the sun, and beside her, 2 cubs rolled playfully in the fallen apples. One cub batted at a fruit like a toy, while the other tried to climb the lowest branch, only to tumble back down with a soft thud. The mother bear lay still, her eyes half closed, clearly resting but fully aware. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying. The schoolyard, usually filled with shouts and running feet, went silent. Children who had been rushing toward the playground froze in place. A boy named Imran whispered, "Are those real bears?" His voice trembled, half awe, half fear. Mrs. Hamid raised a hand, her heart pounding. "Everyone, back inside. Slowly. No running." The children obeyed, retreating step by step, though their eyes remained locked on the scene unfolding at the fence. It was as if a living picture had been painted before them, a family of wild bears in a place meant for games and laughter. Inside, whispers spread through the classrooms like wildfire. Some kids pressed their noses against the windows, eager for a better look. Others buried their heads in their arms, too scared to peek. In the staff room, teachers gathered, voices tense. "We need to call the forestry department," one said. Another worried aloud, "What if the cubs wander closer? What if the mother feels threatened?" Meanwhile, the bears showed no signs of aggression. The cubs rolled in the grass, pawing at the apples, and the mother lifted her head now and then, scanning the schoolyard with steady, calm eyes. She wasn't hunting. She wasn't prowling. She was resting. But resting in the wrong place. For the children, it was surreal. "It's like a storybook," Aisha whispered to her friend. "They're just sitting there, like they came for snack time." Her friend replied, "But what if they get hungry for something else?" The longer the bears stayed, the heavier the tension grew. Teachers debated whether to keep the children indoors or dismiss school early. The decision wasn't easy. One wrong move could alarm the bear, and a startled mother with cubs was the last thing anyone wanted to face. Minutes stretched into an hour. The bears remained, completely unbothered by the hushed commotion nearby. The mother's ears twitched occasionally, but she stayed put, watching, breathing slowly, letting her cubs explore. And then, just as things seemed to settle, one of the cubs began to wobble toward the fence. It batted an apple across the grass, chasing it with clumsy paws. The children gasped in unison from behind the glass. The cub was coming closer, much closer than anyone expected. Would the mother let it? Would she rise? Or would she charge the fence if she felt her cub was in danger? The entire school held its breath. The cub reached the edge of the fence, its tiny paw pressing against the chain link as if testing the boundary between wild and human. The mother bear lifted her head sharply, eyes narrowing. What would happen if the cub decided to climb? What would you have done if you were the teacher, watching a bear cub walk right up to your schoolyard fence? The cub's paw lingered on the cool metal of the fence, its little claws catching in the links as if it were testing the strange boundary. On the other side, behind the glass, dozens of children were frozen in awe and fear. Some pressed their palms to the window, mirroring the cub's gesture unknowingly, while others stepped back, hearts thudding. Mrs. Hamid's voice cut through the whispering. "Step away from the window, children. Everyone stay calm." Her calm tone belied the tightness in her chest. She turned quickly to the nearest colleague. "Call the forestry department. Now." The staff scrambled. Phones rang, voices dropped to urgent whispers. The headmaster, Mr. Rahman, spoke in clipped sentences. "Yes, a bear family. 2 cubs. Near the schoolyard. No, they haven't shown aggression. But the children? Yes, we're keeping them indoors." The operator on the other end promised to send a response team. But in a town tucked away in the hills, response time was unpredictable. Minutes could stretch into hours. Outside, the cub pawed once more at the fence and then flopped back into the grass with a thud. The children exhaled as if they had all been holding the same breath. The mother bear, still resting under the apple trees, had lifted her head at the cub's boldness. She didn't move forward, though, only flicked her ears, then slowly lowered her head again. She was watchful but not alarmed. Inside the classroom, the children's imaginations raced. "What if it climbs?" whispered Imran. "What if it comes inside?" Aisha shook her head, her voice trembling but soft. "It's just curious. It's like us. We want to see them, it wants to see us." The innocence of her words rippled through the group. The fear eased, but not entirely. After all, they were still in the presence of one of the most powerful animals in the region. Teachers debated fiercely in the staff room. "We should dismiss early and send the kids home," one argued. "No, that's dangerous." "What if the children scatter outside and the bear feels threatened?" countered another. Mr. Rahman stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring out the staff room window toward the apple trees. His face was tight, contemplative. "We will keep them inside. Until the authorities arrive. No one leaves this building." Back in the yard, the bear family showed no urgency to move. The cubs tumbled over each other in a wrestling match, sending fallen apples rolling across the grass. The mother adjusted her position, shifting onto her side, her flank rising and falling with slow breaths. She seemed content, as though the schoolyard fence was simply part of her forest, another tree, another border. But the tension inside the school continued to climb. Every passing minute without a response from the forestry team felt heavier. An hour passed. Then another. Children grew restless, their curiosity battling their fear. Teachers tried to distract them with quiet games or reading, but the whispers always circled back to the bears. By mid-afternoon, the situation shifted. One of the cubs discovered the fence again, this time following an apple that had rolled close to the barrier. It batted at the fruit until it bumped against the chain link. And then, with a clumsy determination, the cub placed both paws on the fence and pulled itself halfway up. Gasps erupted in the classroom. "It's climbing," a child shouted. The cub dangled awkwardly for a moment, its small claws hooked into the mesh. It didn't have the skill or strength to scale it fully, but the sight was enough to send a ripple of panic through the teachers. Mrs. Hamid whispered urgently to Mr. Rahman, "If the cub gets over, the mother will follow. We can't wait any longer." As if to answer her fear, the mother bear lifted her head sharply and rose to her feet. The playful atmosphere vanished. Her ears pricked forward, her body stiffened, and her dark eyes fixed on the cub still clinging to the fence. The room fell into silence so complete that even the ticking of the classroom clock seemed loud. The cub squeaked softly, struggling to climb down. The mother's gaze swept across the yard, landing briefly on the school building itself, as if she knew she was being watched. Children ducked instinctively, hiding below the windowsill. Aisha, however, couldn't tear her eyes away. She pressed her forehead to the cool glass, heart racing, whispering under her breath, "Please don't get angry. Please don't get angry." And then, for the first time all day, the mother bear began to walk toward the fence. Each step was measured, heavy, deliberate. Her muscles shifted under her thick fur, her head low, her breath audible even from a distance. The cub squeaked again, its claws slipping. The mother was closing the gap fast. The mother bear reached the fence, her massive head now level with the cub still clinging to the mesh. With one swipe, she could tear it free. With one charge, she could breach the school's fragile boundary. The children crouched behind their desks, waiting. Would she protect, or would she lash out? If you were the headmaster, would you keep the children locked inside, or risk leading them out quietly before things got worse? The mother bear's shadow stretched across the fence, swallowing the patch of grass where her cub hung trembling. She lowered her head, exhaled through her nostrils, and with a surprising gentleness, nudged the cub back down with her paw. The cub tumbled into the grass with a soft thud and immediately scampered behind her, squeaking. From inside the classroom, every child let out a breath at once. Relief rippled across their faces, but fear lingered in the way their eyes darted back toward the looming shape by the fence. "She didn't attack," Aisha whispered, her voice tinged with awe. "She was careful." Mrs. Hamid pressed a hand to her chest, steadying her breath. "Stay quiet, children. We can't assume anything." Minutes ticked by like hours. The mother bear settled again near the trees, though not lying down this time. Her posture was alert, her gaze sweeping over the yard, the school, and the distant hills as though guarding more than just her cubs. Inside, the adults were fraying. Mr. Rahman clutched the receiver of the school's landline, his knuckles pale. "You said a team was on the way. That was 2 hours ago." His voice sharpened. "Yes, I understand they're coming from the city, but these are children. Do you expect us to wait here until nightfall?" The answer he received was unsatisfying. He slammed the phone down harder than intended, startling a group of teachers huddled nearby. "They'll be here when they're here," he muttered. No sooner. The staff debated their dwindling options. One suggested ushering the children through the rear entrance toward the town center. Another worried the noise and movement might draw the bears' attention. What if the cubs chase the children, thinking it's a game? Meanwhile, the children, despite their fear, were glued to the windows. They couldn't look away from the bear family, whose presence was both terrifying and magnetic. The cubs had resumed their play, rolling over each other in the grass, occasionally glancing toward the fence as though aware of the audience behind the glass. At last, the sound of an engine carried faintly on the breeze. Heads snapped toward the road that wound down the hillside. A white pickup truck crawled into view, its hazard lights flashing. Relief surged through the teachers. Finally, Mrs. Hamid whispered. The truck rolled to a stop near the school's front gate. Two uniformed men stepped out, forestry officers, armed not with weapons but with tranquilizer rifles slung over their shoulders. Their movements were deliberate, cautious. One scanned the yard through binoculars. The other raised a hand to signal for quiet, though the schoolyard was already hushed. From her post near the apple trees, the mother bear rose to her full height on all fours. She turned her head toward the truck, ears pricked, body stiffening. The cubs froze mid-play, instinctively pressing close to her flank. The officers crouched low behind their vehicle, whispering into radios. Their gestures were calm, controlled, but their eyes betrayed tension. They weren't dealing with just a lone animal, this was a mother with two cubs, the most unpredictable scenario possible. Inside the classroom, the children crowded closer to the glass despite the teacher's protests. "They're going to take her away," Imran said, his voice a mixture of fear and wonder. "Are they going to shoot her?" Aisha shook her head firmly. "No. They just want to help." But the truth was murkier. Tranquilizers were risky. A misjudged dose could endanger the bear. Too small a dose, and she'd stay awake but furious. Too large, and she could collapse dangerously, even fatally. The officers would have to weigh every decision carefully. One of them raised a hand toward the school, palm open in a universal signal, "Stay back. Don't make noise." Mr. Rahman nodded grimly, pulling the curtains halfway over the windows. Still, through the narrow gaps, the children watched with wide eyes. The officers advanced a few steps, rifles still slung, their boots crunching softly on gravel. The mother bear's head swung sharply toward them. She let out a deep, guttural sound, not quite a roar, but a warning that reverberated in the children's chests even from inside the school. The cubs pressed closer. One officer froze mid-step, raising both arms slowly, showing he carried no threat. The other whispered into his radio, eyes locked on the bear. The tension was unbearable. Every second felt like a thread stretched to its breaking point. Then, the unexpected happened. The smaller cub, emboldened or frightened, no one could tell, bounded toward the fence again, chasing a rolling apple. It smacked the fruit with its paw, sending it bouncing nearer to the officer's side. The cub squeaked with excitement, oblivious to the danger. The mother's body surged forward instantly, protective instinct overriding everything else. She barreled toward the cub, her paws pounding the earth, closing the gap between her family and the officers in seconds. The children gasped. Teachers clutched at their mouths. The officers stiffened, rifles unslung in a single, fluid motion. The cub tumbled to the base of the fence, squeaking helplessly. The mother loomed above, her massive form pressed against the barrier, just feet from the men with tranquilizers. Every player in the scene froze. The bears. The officers. The children. All caught in a moment that could shift into tragedy with a single wrong move. The officer nearest the truck lifted his rifle, finger hovering over the trigger. The mother bear's eyes flashed in the late sun as she shielded her cub against the fence. Would he fire, or would something stop him? If you were the officer, would you risk pulling the trigger now, or wait, knowing 1 second too late could endanger everyone? The forestry officer's finger tightened against the trigger of the tranquilizer rifle, his sights fixed on the mother bear's massive shoulder. His partner hissed, "Wait," but the bear was too close to the fence, her bulk pressed against it, her eyes wide with protective fury. Inside the classroom, the children clutched at each other, some burying their faces in their sleeves, others unable to look away. The teachers whispered hurried prayers, their hearts hammering. The cub squeaked, scrambling awkwardly at the fence as though trying to climb back to safety. The sound cut through the stillness, and something in the officer's resolve wavered. He exhaled slowly, lowering the rifle an inch. "Not yet," he muttered. The mother bear pawed at the ground, sending clods of dirt flying. She wasn't charging, not yet, but her warning was clear: one wrong step, and she would. The second officer took a step forward, his voice low and steady. "Easy, girl. Easy." He kept his arms loose, palms visible, speaking not to the bear's mind but to the fragile balance of the moment. His tone carried across the yard like a thread of calm in the storm. The mother's ears flicked, her head tilting slightly. She huffed, a sharp exhale that misted in the late afternoon air. The cubs pressed close to her legs. For a brief heartbeat, it looked as if she might settle. But then the distant rumble of another vehicle broke the silence. An approaching engine. Doors slamming. Voices calling out. The mother's body stiffened. Her ears flattened. She reared up suddenly on her hind legs, towering against the fence. The metal rattled under the weight of her paw as she swiped at the air, a sound like iron chains shaking. Gasps erupted from inside the school. "Back," one officer barked, grabbing his partner's arm. The first officer raised the rifle again, his hands shaking now. The cub squeaked, darting behind her legs. The mother dropped back to all fours, pacing the fence line, eyes darting between the officers and the building. Her movements were sharper, quicker now, not yet an attack, but no longer the calm watchfulness of earlier. Mr. Ramon stood in the hall, watching through the narrow crack of the curtain. His lips pressed into a thin line. "This is turning," he whispered. "If they don't resolve this soon, something terrible will happen." Children crouched low beneath their desks. Only Aisha stayed glued to the window, her small hand pressed flat against the glass. She whispered softly, almost a prayer, "Please, don't hurt her." The officers conferred quickly, their voices clipped. "If she charges, we have no choice. Too risky." The cubs? Better a tranquilizer than a tragedy. The first officer lifted the rifle again, bracing it against his shoulder. He exhaled sharply, steadying his aim. The tranquilizer dart gleamed in the fading sunlight. But before he could fire, the cub, the same one that had wandered too close before, darted unexpectedly along the fence, chasing another apple that had rolled free. Its squeaky little growl of delight broke the rhythm of the standoff. The mother bear wheeled toward it, her flank brushing the fence. For a moment, her massive body shielded the cub entirely. The rifle's target vanished behind fur and motion. The officer swore under his breath. His finger eased reluctantly off the trigger. He couldn't risk hitting the cub. The second officer grabbed his shoulder. "Not now. Wait for a clean shot." Inside the school, the children's whispers rose again. "Are they going to shoot her? Why won't she leave? Why don't they just let them stay?" The teachers tried to hush them, but the truth sat heavy in every heart. This wasn't a problem with an easy answer. The cub returned triumphantly with its apple, plopping down in the grass to chew noisily. The mother lowered her head, sniffing at it, then gave a soft chuff, a sound the children hadn't expected. It was almost tender. For one strange, fleeting moment, the schoolyard felt less like a battlefield and more like a nursery. But the illusion shattered when the mother turned back toward the officers. She let out a deep, guttural growl, louder than before, vibrating through the fence and into the very walls of the school. The officers froze again, rifles ready. And then, the growl stopped. The bear lowered her head, sniffed the air, and looked not at the men, but past them. Her eyes caught something on the horizon, something in the direction of the road. Her posture shifted from threat to wary curiosity. "What's she looking at?" one officer whispered. The sound of the second vehicle grew louder. More people were arriving. And the bear knew it. The mother bear turned away from the fence, ears swiveling, gaze fixed on the road where more humans were approaching. She huffed, then nudged her cubs toward the apple trees with a deliberate urgency. Was she preparing to retreat, or to make a desperate move before she was surrounded? Do you think the mother bear senses danger from more people arriving, or is she simply trying to protect her cubs from what comes next? The distant rumble of engines grew louder until a convoy of cars crested the hill and pulled into the dirt clearing near the school. Doors slammed. Voices spilled out, sharp and excited, carrying the restless energy of townsfolk who had come to see the spectacle for themselves. From the safety of the classrooms, the children's eyes widened. "More people," whispered Imran. Aisha shook her head, biting her lip. "That's not good." The mother bear's ears twitched at the sound. She swung her massive head toward the road, muscles rippling under her coat. Her cubs pressed close, their small shapes trembling against her flank. The forestry officers cursed under their breath. "No, no, no," one muttered, slamming the side of the truck with his palm. "This is the last thing we need." A dozen townspeople fanned out along the fence line, craning their necks for a better view. Some had their phones raised, recording. Others whispered in awe, as if at a zoo exhibit. But the bear didn't see it that way. She let out a deep, rolling growl, low enough to vibrate in the children's chests even through the classroom walls. The cubs squeaked, shifting nervously. "Get them back," one officer shouted, waving his arms. "Everyone needs to step away from the fence." But few listened. Curiosity was stronger than caution. Inside the school, the teachers pulled the curtains fully shut. Mr. Ramon's voice was grim. "Children, stay back from the windows." But the muffled voices outside, the growls, the rising panic, none of it could be ignored. The school felt like a drum, its walls amplifying the sound of fear. The forestry officers conferred quickly. "We can't handle this with civilians so close. If she charges, they'll be the first to pay," the other finished. The bear shifted again, her head swaying side to side. She was assessing the new threat. Her body tensed, her paws scraping the dirt, a clear signal that she was ready to defend her young. The crowd, oblivious, moved closer still. A young man laughed nervously, pointing his phone over the fence. "She's huge. Get a video." The mother snapped her jaws shut with a sound like breaking wood. The crowd flinched back. Phones lowered. At last, fear began to ripple through the spectators. "Move back, now," the officer barked. He raised his tranquilizer rifle again, tracking the mother's shoulder as she shifted her weight. The mother bear's growl deepened, her chest heaving. For the first time, she seemed to consider more than just defense. She seemed to consider breaking the invisible boundary between her and the humans. Inside the classroom, Aisha whispered, "She doesn't want to fight. She just wants them to leave." But the children knew, one wrong move from the crowd, one misstep from the officers, and everything could change. Then, unexpectedly, the cubs moved. Drawn by the scent of fresh apples scattered near the fence, they toddled forward again, their tiny bodies brushing dangerously close to the barrier that separated them from the shouting humans. "No," one officer hissed, gripping his rifle tighter. His partner swore under his breath, raising a hand as if he could physically hold back disaster. The mother lunged forward to block the cubs, her massive body striking the fence so hard it rattled like thunder. The crowd screamed and stumbled back, panic overtaking curiosity at last. Some fell. Some ran. Others froze, too shocked to move. Inside the school, the children clutched their desks. Some cried softly. Even the teachers were pale, their hands trembling. The officers raised their rifles in unison. But at that exact moment, the bear turned her head. Her eyes, dark, glinting, locked not on the crowd, not on the officers, but on the school itself. On the windows where the children hid. It wasn't aggression. It wasn't rage. It was something else, an awareness. The mother bear lowered her head, nudging her cubs gently back toward the trees. She let out a huff, not a growl, but a guiding sound, urging them to follow. The children pressed to the glass, watching in awe. "She's leaving," one whispered. But she didn't leave. Not yet. She paused under the apple tree, her body taut, her gaze never straying from the building. And then, slowly, she sat down. Her cubs clambered over her lap, squeaking softly. It was as if she were planting herself between her family and the chaos beyond the fence, daring the world to come closer, yet refusing to abandon her young. The officers didn't lower their rifles. The crowd didn't stop whispering. The children didn't stop watching. The standoff wasn't over. It had only deepened. As the sun dipped lower, shadows stretching long across the schoolyard, the forestry officer raised his radio to his mouth. "We need a decision. Do we fire, or do we wait?" His voice cracked with tension. The reply on the other end crackled faintly, "Hold your position, unless she makes the first move." But how long could they wait before someone snapped? Do you think the crowd made things worse for the bears, or was their presence the only thing stopping the officers from acting too soon? The day slipped into late afternoon, and the shadows of the apple trees stretched longer across the schoolyard. The air cooled, but the tension only thickened. What had begun as a spectacle now felt like a siege, two worlds locked in a fragile standoff. The mother bear remained under the apple tree, her cubs tumbling across her broad shoulders and tiny paws patting at fallen fruit. From a distance, it might have looked serene. But anyone close enough to hear her steady growls knew better. She was not resting. She was warning. Inside the classrooms, the children whispered in the dimming light. The teachers had kept them long past dismissal for safety. "I want to go home," whispered little Sana, tears brimming in her eyes. Aisha, older and braver, put a hand on her shoulder. "If we go outside now, we'll scare her. We have to wait." Mr. Rahman checked the time, pacing by the chalkboard. He knew the parents waiting beyond the police barricades were growing restless. His phone buzzed again, unanswered messages piling up. He couldn't leave. He couldn't risk it. Outside, the forestry officers were still locked in debate. The leader, a man named Tariq, rubbed his temples. "We can't keep the children here overnight. But moving them risks panic, and panic will set her off." His deputy scowled, rifle tight in his hands. "We can't let the crowd keep pressing closer either. Look at them." The townspeople had thinned, but not disappeared. Some lingered at the edge of the clearing, lit by the fading glow. Their voices drifted. "She's just protecting her cubs. Why haven't they shot her already? She's not leaving until dark." The bear's ears flicked at each sound. Every whisper felt like a stone thrown into a still pond. She was listening. Then, a shift. One cub wandered too close to the fence again, chasing the flash of a butterfly. Tiny paws clutched at the metal links. Gasps echoed from both the crowd and the classrooms. The mother rose instantly, towering, her roar tearing through the twilight. The cub stumbled back, but the sound, primal, bone-deep, silenced everything. For a heartbeat, even the birds stilled. "Easy, girl," Tarek muttered under his breath, though the bear could not hear him. His finger hovered near the trigger of his tranquilizer rifle. The teachers pressed their students to the floor. Curtains drawn or not, the roar had shaken them. "Stay calm," Mr. Ramon urged, though his own hands trembled. The mother's fury ebbed into heavy breaths. She lowered her head and nosed the cub gently back to safety. But her gaze flicked again to the building, to the humans watching through the glass. It was as if she understood exactly who was watching, and why. Then, something remarkable happened. The smaller cub, curious, clumsy, toddled back to the fence. But this time, it didn't grab at the metal. Instead, it sat, nose twitching, eyes wide, staring at the dim windows of the school. On the other side, in one of those windows, Aisha crouched. Their eyes met. Her classmates gasped. "Sit down, Aisha," someone hissed. But she couldn't move. The cub wasn't afraid of her. It was curious. The mother bear turned, following her cub's gaze. For a terrible moment, everyone thought she might charge. Instead, she sat too, lowering her massive body behind her little one, as though acknowledging the silent exchange. From the officer's line, a wave of unease rippled. "What is she doing?" the deputy whispered. "She's watching them," Tarek said slowly. "Or letting her cub watch." Inside the classroom, the children were frozen. Aisha's heart pounded, but she didn't look away. The setting sun dipped lower, painting the sky in orange fire. Against it, the silhouette of the mother bear and her cub looked both magnificent and terrifying. The school, the crowd, the officers, all of them seemed small in comparison to this silent family under the trees. Minutes dragged like hours. The world narrowed to a quiet tableau, children inside, bear family outside, an invisible thread binding them through the glass. But threads are fragile. From the road came the screech of tires. A latecomer barreled into the clearing, headlights slicing across the field. The cub squeaked, startled, stumbling back into its mother. The mother rose in an instant, her roar splitting the dusk again. The crowd screamed. The children ducked. Officers raised their rifles. The fragile peace shattered. With the sun gone and chaos rising, the mother bear charged, not at the school, not at the children, but straight toward the fence where the newest car's headlights had flared. The officers shouted, fingers on triggers. But if they fired now, would they hit the mother, or her cubs? If you were the officer holding the tranquilizer rifle, would you take the shot, or hold your fire? The car's headlights flared too bright, cutting across the orchard and igniting every shadow into sharp contrast. The roar of the mother bear shook the ground, echoing off the school's brick walls. She stood tall, hackles raised, her cubs pressed close against her legs. Chaos erupted. "Turn those lights off," Tarek bellowed at the driver, waving frantically. But the man had already panicked, fumbling at the wheel, the engine revving as if to flee. "Hold your line," officers shouted. Rifles, tranquilizer guns, and flashlights all pointed toward the fence. The bear paced, head swinging, growls low and constant. Inside the school, children screamed. The teachers rushed them away from the windows, though some still peeked through the gaps in the curtains. Aisha pressed her back against the wall, her heartbeat wild. She could still hear the cubs squeak in her ears, fragile and scared. The mother bear lunged toward the fence, slamming her weight against it. Metal rattled, a hollow thunder that sent fresh waves of fear through the crowd. Sparks flew as claws raked against the chain links. "She's going to break through," the deputy cried. "No," Tariq barked, raising his tranquilizer gun. His hands shook. The bear was moving too fast, too erratic. A bad shot could wound her, or worse, miss her and send her charging straight into the schoolyard. The cubs clung tighter, their tiny cries cutting into the night. The sound pierced deeper than any roar. The children inside fell silent, listening, their fear mixing with something unexpected, empathy. "Sir," whispered one of the younger officers, eyes wide, "what if she's not trying to attack? What if she's warning us off?" But warnings could only last so long. The driver, terrified, threw his car into reverse. The tires spat gravel, lights jerking wildly. The beams slashed across the orchard, blinding for a second. The bear spun, mistaking the motion for a threat. Her charge wasn't measured this time. It was instinct. Protection. Rage. The fence groaned under her weight. For a sickening moment, it seemed the links would give way. The cubs cried louder, torn between fear and the safety of their mother's shadow. Tariq exhaled. "If she takes one more step, I have to fire." But in that frozen second, another sound joined the night, softer, human, but clear. From inside the classroom, Aisha's voice carried through the open sliver of a window. Trembling but steady enough. "It's okay, please don't be scared." The teachers gasped. "Aisha, sit down." But she didn't. Her small frame leaned just enough into the opening, her eyes locked on the bear family. She wasn't shouting, not challenging. She was soothing, her tone the same one she'd used earlier to calm her classmates. And the cubs heard. Their cries softened, shifting into snuffles. They pressed closer to their mother, who froze mid-snarling breath. Her ears twitched. Her chest heaved. The silence stretched long enough for the officers' fingers to ease off their triggers. Long enough for the car's driver to cut his headlights. Long enough for the crowd to hush, sensing something delicate happening between girl and bear. Aisha swallowed hard, whispering again. "It's okay, you're safe." The mother bear lowered her head, eyes glinting in the thin moonlight. Her growl quieted to a rumble, not gone but less sharp, less desperate. She nudged her cubs back toward the base of the apple tree, a shadow of calm slipping into her movements. She's standing down," Tariq murmured, barely believing it. The officers exchanged nervous glances but didn't lower their weapons. The crowd beyond the barricade leaned forward, whispers rising like wind. Inside, the children huddled in awe. Even the teachers had no words. But peace is never so simple. Because just as the bear lowered herself again onto the grass, a new sound cracked the night, not the growl of an animal, not the murmur of children, but the sharp metallic click of a rifle bolt sliding into place. Everyone turned. At the far edge of the barricade, one of the townsmen had raised his hunting rifle. His face was tight with fear, his hands trembling. "This has gone on long enough," he shouted. "She's going to kill someone if we don't end it now." The barrel pointed straight toward the mother bear's heart. And in that instant, every fragile thread of calm threatened to snap. Would Tariq's officers stop the man in time, or would the bear family's fragile safety shatter in one reckless gunshot? If you were standing in that crowd and saw someone aim a rifle at the mother bear, would you intervene or stay silent? The crowd froze as the gleam of the hunting rifle caught in the moonlight. The man's hands trembled, but his jaw was set. His voice cut through the orchard like a blade. She's too close to the children. End this before it's too late. Gasps rippled through the parents and neighbors pressed behind the barricade. Some muttered in agreement, fear coloring their words. Others cried out in protest. Don't shoot. The cubs? Tarek reacted instantly. Put that gun down, he shouted, stepping toward the man, his tranquilizer rifle lowering but not abandoned. The man barked back. You've had all day to handle this. I won't let my daughter sit locked in that school while you gamble with her life. His eyes flicked toward the windows, toward the faint outlines of children watching. Inside, little Sana whimpered. What's happening? Mr. Rahman pressed a finger to his lips. Stay back, children. But even he couldn't mask the fear in his eyes. The children could see it, could feel it radiating. Aisha stayed by the window, frozen between two worlds, the desperate voice of the man with the rifle and the deep, steady breathing of the mother bear outside. The bear hadn't moved yet. She hadn't charged. Her cubs nestled against her flank, their tiny bodies rising and falling with hers. But her ears were pricked forward, her nose twitching. She knew danger hung in the air. Tarek raised his voice, sharp and commanding. Lower the gun, now. If you fire, the cubs will scatter, and she'll defend them with everything she has. You'll endanger every child in that building. The man's grip tightened. His finger hovered near the trigger. His fear had curdled into anger, the kind that doesn't hear reason. The deputy officer edged closer, eyes on the rifle. His hand twitched toward his holster. Sir, let me disarm him. No sudden moves, Tarek snapped, never breaking eye contact with the hunter. We spook him, we spook her. And then it's over. The crowd buzzed, the sound rising like a storm. Some begged the man to stop. Others whispered their approval. Fear makes allies and enemies in strange ways. The mother bear let out a low, guttural growl. It rolled through the ground, quiet but unmistakable. She wasn't charging, not yet. She was warning. Her eyes fixed on the human with the rifle. And that was when Aisha did the unthinkable. She pushed the window open wider, leaning halfway out into the cool night. Her small voice trembled but carried with startling clarity. Stop. Please, don't hurt her. Every head turned. Parents gasped. Teachers lunged for her, but she held her ground, knuckles white on the window frame. She's not trying to hurt us, Aisha cried. She's just scared. Just protecting her babies, like our parents protect us. Her words cut sharper than any order Tarek had given. The crowd stilled. The man with the rifle faltered, blinking as if shaken awake by the sound of a child's plea. The cubs squeaked, pressing tighter to their mother's fur. The bear's growl softened again, her head dipping, her posture lowering. She looked, for a fleeting moment, less like a monster and more like a mother at the edge of her strength. The hunter's breathing came ragged, heavy. His finger slipped off the trigger. The barrel lowered, inch by inch. Tarek seized the moment, stepping forward. That's enough. Hand me the rifle. The deputy moved in. After a tense pause, the weapon was passed over, the man's shoulders sagging with a mix of defeat and relief. His anger hadn't vanished, but fear had loosened its grip. The crowd exhaled as one, the tension snapping like a rope cut free. Mothers clutched their children. Teachers hugged each other inside the school. But the standoff wasn't over. Because even as the rifle was taken away, a new danger emerged. The sound of sirens cut through the night. Red and blue lights flickered down the road, flashing against the apple trees. Another unit, unfamiliar voices shouting, new orders crackling over radios. Reinforcements had arrived. And with them came men who hadn't watched the long hours of patience, the subtle shifts, the quiet bond forming between girl and bear. They saw only one thing, a threat. "Take the shot if you've got it," barked a voice from the dark. Tarek spun, fury in his eyes. "Stand down. Nobody fires unless I give the order." But the newcomers were already raising their weapons. Would the new arrivals undo everything, one rash shot destroying the fragile peace built between the schoolchildren and the mother bear? If you had just calmed the situation and then saw new people arrive ready to use force, what would you do to stop them? The orchard glowed red and blue as the fresh patrol cars idled at the edge of the clearing. Sirens had been silenced, but the pulsing lights painted the apple trees in frantic colors. To the newly arrived officers, it looked like a scene ready to explode, a massive bear just yards from a school building, children trapped inside, and a restless crowd on edge. "Load your rifles," barked their leader, a square-shouldered man with a hard jaw. "If she charges, we put her down." Tarek's voice cut through the dark. "Stand down. This situation is under control." The leader sneered. "Control? You've let a wild animal threaten children for hours. That's not control, that's negligence." The mother bear shifted uneasily, her ears twitching at the raised voices. Her cubs clung tighter, pressing into her belly fur. She lowered her head protectively, but her growl rumbled again, louder now, vibrating through the cool night air. Inside the school, the children could feel it. Every rumble made their chests vibrate. Sanaa sobbed quietly, clutching her desk. Mr. Rahman and the other teachers tried to soothe them, but their own fear was leaking through. Only Aisha remained by the window, her wide eyes flicking between the line of armed men and the mother bear beneath the apple tree. She whispered to herself, too soft for anyone to hear, "Please, don't let them hurt her." The crowd at the barricade erupted into arguments. Some shouted at the police to fire, to end the standoff before disaster struck. Others cried out in defense of the bear family. "She hasn't hurt anyone. She's just hungry." The voices tangled into a rising storm. The bear rose halfway to her feet, sensing the chaos. Tarek swore under his breath. Every second felt like glass cracking underfoot. Then came the sharp metallic sound of safeties clicking off. The new officers had raised their rifles, barrels glinting in the strobing lights. "Don't do it," Tarek roared. He moved in front of them, arms wide. "You fire now, you'll spark a stampede," the crowd, the children, the cubs scattering. "Move aside, Tarek," the leader growled. "We're not here to negotiate with animals." The bear's growl deepened into a roar, louder than before, shaking the orchard. The cubs whimpered, pressing back toward the fence. And then Aisha did it again. Her small voice cut through the chaos like a bell. "Stop." Every gun, every eye, every gasp turned toward the classroom window. Aisha leaned out, hair tumbling into the moonlight, her voice trembling but fierce. "She's not attacking us," she cried. "She's protecting her babies, just like my mom would protect me." The crowd went silent. Even the newcomers hesitated, rifles trembling in their hands. "Look at her," Aisha shouted, pointing. "If she wanted to hurt us, she would have broken through the fence already. She doesn't want to fight. She just wants to be safe with her cubs. The bear lowered slightly, her posture shifting. The roar faded into a low rumble, then into silence. Her massive head turned toward the window, toward the child who had been speaking to her all evening. The leader of the new officers muttered, "It's a wild animal, not a pet. We can't trust it." But his words sounded thinner now, less certain. The crowd wasn't rallying behind him. They were looking at the girl, at the bear, at the way the two seemed bound in some fragile, invisible thread. Tarek seized the moment. He turned to the crowd, voice booming. "Do you see? This is not an attack. This is survival. If we fire, we destroy not just a bear, but two cubs who depend on her. If we fire, we teach our children that fear, not patience, decides how we treat the wild." Parents in the crowd lowered their voices, shifting uneasily. The teachers inside the school exchanged looks, some wiping tears. And then, a moment that seemed to still the night. The mother bear, massive and powerful, slowly lay down on her side under the apple tree. Her cubs climbed over her, pressing against her warmth, nuzzling into her fur. She licked their heads gently, ignoring the rifles, ignoring the crowd. It was a gesture so ordinary, so tender, that it broke something in everyone watching. Even the hardened officer faltered. His rifle dipped. His jaw clenched, not in defiance now but in thought. Aisha's whisper carried across the stillness. "See? She's just a mother." The orchard seemed to exhale with her words. But the tension wasn't gone. Not yet. Because while the bear rested, the reality remained: the children couldn't stay locked in the school all night. The bear family couldn't remain trapped under the apple trees forever. And one wrong move, could still turn peace into chaos. The hardest decision had yet to be made. Would the humans find a way to guide the bear family safely back into the forest, or would the fragile balance collapse before dawn? If you were in charge, would you risk waiting longer for the bear family to leave on their own, or take action to move them out? The orchard lay in breathless silence, broken only by the steady hum of idling patrol cars and the soft whimpers of cubs pressing closer to their mother. Above the trees, the moon had dipped lower, and a pale gray light hinted at the coming dawn. The night had stretched unbearably long, but its story was not yet finished. Tarek lowered his arms slowly, careful not to spook the bear or the men still gripping rifles. His voice, calmer now but no less firm, carried through the orchard. "We've tried fear. We've tried shouting. Look where it's brought us. Let's try something else: respect." The leader of the fresh unit still looked unconvinced, but he gave a tight nod. His rifle dropped fully to his side. The others followed, though reluctantly. The crowd behind the barricade let out the first collective breath in hours. Inside the school, the teachers began whispering among themselves, considering how to move the children safely if the bear stayed longer. But Aisha hadn't left the window. Her eyes stayed locked on the bear family. She noticed the way the cubs pawed at fallen apples, batting them playfully even while pressed to their mother's side. Their innocence stirred something warm in her chest. She whispered again, as though reminding herself, "She's just a mother." And that whisper carried. Mr. Rahman, standing behind her, repeated it under his breath. Then another teacher. Then a parent in the crowd outside. Until the orchard was dotted with the soft murmur of words that felt less like defense and more like prayer. "She's just a mother." The mother bear stirred. She rose slowly, stretching her heavy limbs, her nose twitching toward the dark line of forest beyond the orchard. The cubs followed clumsily, their tiny shapes dwarfed by the grass. She didn't rush. She didn't panic. She walked steadily, her shoulders rolling like waves, her cubs toddling behind. And for the first time all night, the crowd didn't flinch or scatter. They just watched, silent, reverent, as the bear family began moving away from the schoolyard. Every step felt like a decision. Every pause like a question. Would she turn back? Would the cubs stumble and make her growl again? But no, her path was steady. The line of officers shifted, nervous about letting her cross. Tarek raised a hand and shook his head. "Let them go," he said. His voice brooked no argument. And this time, no one argued. The orchard path opened. The mother bear padded across the dirt lane, her cubs wobbling after her. The flashing lights bathed her in red and blue one last time, then she vanished into the shadowed trees. Only when the forest had fully swallowed her did the orchard finally exhale. The crowd broke into murmurs, some in disbelief, some in relief. Parents held their children tighter, teachers wiped at their eyes, and even the hardened officers looked a little dazed. Aisha pressed her forehead to the window, tears she hadn't realized she'd been holding streaming down her cheeks. She had seen it, the choice to walk away, the grace of survival without violence. Mr. Rahman put a hand on her shoulder. "You were brave," he whispered. "Braver than many of us tonight." Outside, Tarek gave the all-clear signal. The children were escorted safely from the school at last, blinking against the early light, clutching their parents' hands. The orchard no longer felt like a battleground. It felt like a memory. As the last patrol car drove off and the crowd dispersed, a strange hush lingered. The schoolyard, the apple trees, even the forest edge, they had been witnesses. And witnesses never forget. Weeks later, when autumn deepened and apples ripened again, children in the schoolyard pointed toward the orchard with wide eyes. They whispered about that night, the bear family, the flashing lights, the girl at the window. The story had grown, as stories do, but its heart was unchanged. They had seen a wild family live, not die. Tourists who visited the town asked about the orchard, and locals told them proudly, "That's where the bear family came. And that's where we learned patience is stronger than fear." And sometimes, in the soft hours before dawn, farmers swore they heard rustling at the edge of the trees, a mother bear and her cubs, moving quietly under the cover of leaves, leaving the orchard in peace. It was never confirmed. It didn't need to be. Because what mattered was that when humans and nature clashed under the apple trees, one small voice chose compassion over fear. And that choice, echoing in the orchard still, made all the difference. What if, next time, the story ended differently? What if patience had given way to panic? Would we still tell it with the same pride? Do you believe wild animals can sense when humans mean them no harm, or was this just a rare moment of luck?